And we're live with Dana Rodgers. So good to chat again. I've just got so much admiration for what you've done and what you've achieved, and you've put your life into this whole sacred cow project and regenerative agriculture. And yeah, so thanks for coming on to have a chat.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And I suppose the first question for a bit of backstory, what got you so passionate that Rob was a co-author on the book, but was really your baby for the last 4 years, and you've put 4 years into your life of trying to explain this really complex but important topic. What got you so passionate about that? What sparked that?
I'm trying to think of the most efficient way to tell you.
Said all these topics that I've got to chat about, we could talk about for an hour each. But,
Yes, I know. I was warning you. Well, I'll give you the quick version is that I was super malnourished as a kid. I had an undiagnosed celiac disease and a very similar story to Rob, actually. Like some weird learning disabilities just due to, not absorbing any nutrition at all. Underweight, like low muscle tone. I was just a mess. And I didn't find out I had celiac until I was 26. And so I started digging more into nutrition, and then I found Rob's book. And so gluten-free helped a little, but paleo sealed it all up. And I completely changed my career and became a dietitian in my 30s because I found this and wanted to help more people and take insurance and work with doctors and all of that. So that's the nutrition end of it. And, I've found, nutrient density and high protein and protein leverage to be like that next level that works so well for people. And
the
so
holy grail of nutrition.
Totally on board with exactly everything you say. So we're 100% aligned. And I had so much fun in that nutrient density challenge, by the way. I tell people about that all the time.
Very cool to see.
I'm super competitive. And so I'm running around trying to find endives and to get I don't even remember what they were for, but I was like, oh my God, I must eat. But it ended up, I was going to have to eat 7 bowls of endives in order to get whatever I needed from them. But I learned a ton, and it was just super trying to beat Rhonda Patrick at nutrient density. That's super fun. And then at the same time, I grew up on Eastern Long Island, where it's kind of known as a vacation destination for a lot of New Yorkers, but there are a lot of farms out there too. And so I worked on farms as my summer job in high school and college, and then started a little garden, got more and more down the rabbit hole, ended up spending 18 years living on a working farm with my recently ex-husband, and just learned a ton about regenerative agriculture and the role of animals in that process, and why you have to have animal inputs in order to have healthy vegetables. And so I was wanting to write this book that really combined nutrient density and optimal human nutrition with optimal food production. To me, it's the same thing. And it's such an easy sell on people who are already into the ancestral health mindset, because of course, if you want to eat like our ancestors, we should also mimic natural cycles for food production too, super easy. Not as easy sell on environmentalists who all believe we need to be cutting back on meat and eating, whole grains and vegetables only. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. But anyhow, so I finally convinced Rob that it was time to write this book. It was really nice to have his assistance in getting a good publishing deal and, more audience. And also he's really creative when it comes to storytelling. And so the example of Grass World in the book was his idea.
Head, doesn't it? It's hard to unsee that.
And so it's really fun for me to brainstorm with him, because we work really well together in that way.
I think when I was chatting to you ages ago, you'd been working on the book for a while and said, oh, Rob came in to review it. And then, oh, Rob's a co-author and we're writing the book together. But you'd sort of been working on this thing for a while and then it blew up into something more. But yeah, it's been 4 years of your life that you've passionately devoted to what is a very important topic. Like you say, people who haven't been involved in real life farming get, easily captured by a simple message, but it's nothing but a simple message. It's not simple at all. It's very complex, and you put 4 years of your life into doing a book and a film to try and explain that. But yeah, it's yeah.
And they're really different. So if anyone is watching this and maybe only saw the film, the book is it's better. It's way deeper because you can't. These are hard things to explain in a film, and also it was so hard to do it in a film in 120 minutes. Nutrition, environment, ethics, so many things. And so in the book, we were really able to dig in deeply, especially in the ethics section and like the meat and human culture, which was my favorite part of it. Like, what does meat represent? Why is it so polarizing? And how did we even get to this place where meat is both, the savior to some and the villain to others? And anyway, so that was the most interesting to me.
It's such a hot button topic that you got the carnivores on one end going, only eat meat, plants are the devil. And then you've got all the vegans on the other extreme with the polar opposite view. And some of them seem to be healthy on either end, and there's limitations. And it's just crazy how divisive this is. So the number one question, maybe just to get out of the way, is what is regenerative agriculture in a soundbite? It's a new catchy term that's starting to catch on, but what does it mean?
Yeah, so it is a catchy term, and it's basically when the organic movement first kind of came about in the 70s, it's really what they meant. It's just that organic got co-opted and then sustainable got co-opted. But
every little term gets co-opted and greenwashed.
Oh my gosh. Regenerative is too. Like, I'm meeting all these vegan regenerative cashew bar companies and stuff like that. What are their labor practices? Like cashew, that's hugely problematic. Anyway, importing things and wrapping it in plastic and shipping it around, and oh my gosh. But so the idea behind this new term, regenerative, which is really like sometimes bugs me because all these millennials think that they like invented it, and there are so many old hippies out there that have been doing this for so long, and even before them, Native Americans have been practicing regenerative agriculture forever. But it's the idea that we want to leave things better than when we found them. So we want to build soil health. We want to do everything to try to increase biodiversity, meaning as many life forms, plants and animals above and below ground as possible. And animals are critical to that. You have to have livestock in order to have a regenerative system. And people debate me on that one, but I'm pretty firm on that. As well as like, in order to have an optimal diet, you have to have animal inputs as well for humans.
So just unpack that. Why is it so important to have plants and animals together? You can't just have animals growing in a corner and plants with this big monocrop industrial ag system in the other corner, completely separate. Why do you need to integrate the two for human and planetary health?
So grasslands co-evolved with grazing animals. That's the grass must have pruning from the animals in order to keep. Everyone who has a lawn knows that they have to mow it, because if you don't mow the grass, it just kind of gets longer and longer and longer, and then it just oxidizes and turns brown and falls over and dies. But if you mow it and water it and fertilize it, then it's a healthy lawn. But cattle can do that naturally out in the wild. They can mow it and they can fertilize it with their manure and their carcasses and their urine, and through that process, grasslands can then support other life as well. And so here in the U.S., you probably don't have the Audubon Society in
No,
Australia. Do you have that group? It's
no.
a really big bird group here in the
Oh,
U.S., and they're now working with ranchers and have Audubon certified beef, because they
wow.
were, for many years, a lot of these environmental and conservation organizations wanted to have just like empty vistas of just empty fields. We're just gonna let nature do it. And what they realized is we don't have the herbivores that we used to have. We don't have all the deer and the elk and bison and all the other animals to keep these meadows healthy. And so they
Mm,
just get overgrown and they end up being really unhealthy. And so you
mm,
have to have as many different types of grazers and predators and birds and pollinators above ground, and then as many different microbes below ground as possible in order to have the most resilient ecosystem possible.
yeah, and that creates such an amazing, resilient ecosystem that's good for us, and and good for the environment at the same time. So that
Mhm.
the healthy microbiome of the soil just creates healthy animals and healthy plants that are actually good for us and lead to health and nutrient density. And it's all wonderfully interrelated in a way that we are so separated from these days. And I'm blown away by, you talked about fertilizer, but in 1908 they patented the Haber-Bosch process that enabled you to extract energy from methane from natural gas and just basically dump it into the soil and grow all these plants really quickly.
Nitrogen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It just replaced the need for animals in there, but that just brings energy, nitrogen. It doesn't bring all the other nutrients that come with that healthy, diverse microbiome and that the animals bring, and the animal manure. And it's just crazy how that has been able to separate us from the need to have those animals and plants integrated. And it's basically created the population explosion that we're trying to solve with how do we feed 10 billion people in 2050. But it's like, oh, wait up, we wouldn't have that problem. It's just the crazy revelation that does my brain in, that you half the people on the planet wouldn't be here if we couldn't feed them with this artificial synthetic fertilizer we've created. And we're just doubling down on that, you know, monocrop system with the technology that created it. It's just like, whoa, nobody sees that. Why does nobody see that?
Yeah, you just touched on a lot of really taboo things all at once right there. But
It completely
it's like, how are we
explodes
going
my
to feed all these
brain.
people? It's like, why do we have all these people to feed?
Yeah,
And uh, so in the book,
they're really hard questions, and I don't know how to answer them, and they're not easy to grapple with, and everybody looks away. But that's
mhm,
the reality: is we've created these synthetic ways to overpopulate the world, and we're saying we're going to continue to do that by more large scale agriculture, separating plants and animals with large tractors, and get rid of all the animals. And it's like, wow.
it's really distorted, isn't it? It's like
Mm,
totally, and I feel like there's only a handful of us that actually like have the right, like everyone else is wearing these weird distorted lenses and we're the only ones that can actually see it happening. um and yeah, in the book Ishmael, have you read Daniel Quinn?
I haven't read that one, no.
Okay, I don't, it's a trilogy, so I'm not sure if it's Ishmael or one of the other two books, but he talks about, if you take a shoebox or a box and you have 100 mice in there and you give them exactly enough food for 100 mice, you're going to keep having 100 mice.
Mm,
But if you give them enough food for 500 mice, you're going to
mm,
have 500 mice.
mm.
Um, anyway, it populate, you can't talk about
Yeah, you're going to right away from the topic. So greenwashing, how have we
yeah,
co-opted?
yeah, yeah. Let's just talk about greenwashing.
How has big ag, big food, big industry? I mean, you look at the people behind Eat Lancet and all the little logos of, from Google to fertilizers to pharmaceutical companies to all the big food companies that want you to eat in this, monocrop,
Within
exploited
planetary
and
boundaries.
What was that?
They'll say within planetary boundaries. We need to eat within planetary boundaries. That's what they'll say.
Yeah.
Eat, land, set. And it's so funny because all these companies are looking at, well, what of our broken system is the most, it has the least emissions, and then how can we create human feed from that, instead of us looking at what is the ideal diet for thriving humans and how do we produce that in a way that is friendly to the planet, right? Those are two very different ways of approaching this very complex topic.
Yeah, the most efficient way to feed humans is just to take the chemical fertilizers, dump them into the soil, create high fructose corn syrup, refined flour, and refined oil, and just keep feeding the population that will just
give them a little variety and turn it
mice
into
to 500 mice to an infinite number of mice, using the energy from non-renewable natural gases that will create a different sort of human to what was seen 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, we're all going to be like Wall-E.
It is. That's the most prophetic dystopian picture that gets into my mind. Wall-E, those people who are all just, they can't move. They're just walking bags of industrial seed oil and far from healthy. It's just a crazy dystopian nightmare that
you can see at any grocery store in the United States when you see them shopping. Yeah. So greenwashing. Let's get ourselves back up the rabbit hole. And I should mention to everyone who's watching this that I was joking. Marty has never seen Drunk History, but this could turn into that only because this is the end of the day for me. It's morning for Marty, but it's been the end of a long week. And so this is tequila, seltzer, and some bitters. So I'm
going to make an interesting
full disclosure. Yeah. Greenwashing. One of the companies I hate the most as far as greenwashing is Oatly. They're terrible. But all of them are pretty bad too, saying, no evil, no death, no harm, food that you can feel pure and angelic about eating because there couldn't have possibly been any death in this. And I think most people who are buying these products really just feel guilty that an animal died for them. And they see these images of these horrible images that are spread all over the place of animal abuse that's happening in our CAFO animal system. And certainly some of that happens. And I've, served on boards for animal welfare. We need to change the system, and there are better and worse ways of raising animals for sure. And, industrial chicken, I would say, is way even worse than industrial beef production. So if someone's in a grocery store and their choice is like typical beef, typical chicken, or typical pork, get the beef because it's about 30% more nutrient dense than chicken.
Wow.
Way less omega-6s. People don't realize how many omega-6s are in chicken. But also pigs and chickens are indoors in horrible conditions their entire lives, eating only grain, where all cattle, even if they're finished on a feedlot, start off on pasture, and then may spend 3 to 4 months in a feedlot being finished. But it's way less mean to the animal than pork and chicken. But the greenwashing, saying that no animals died, that this is a pure and clean product. I mean, now when I go to these food shows, I go to these natural product expos. There's people, these plant-based companies are taking over the vegan, ultra-processed food companies, and it's all these halos of purity, and it's just absolute BS. And so one of the things I'm working on now is actually to show why avoiding meat is actually quite elitist. And it's fine if you individually want to do that, but to set global dietary policy because you don't like the idea that animals died is completely unethical. And there's a lot of people in the world that don't have the privilege to push away meat, and they don't have the access to the variety of plant foods that you would need in order to have, a somewhat mockingly healthy-ish vegan diet. They don't have access to pharmacies to get the supplements. I mean, none of that is happening in many developing countries.
Yeah. I suppose from a greenwashing point of view, it's like they've jumped on board the next trend, the next fad that they see that people are interested in, is how do we save the planet? How do we feed 10 billion people in a sustainable manner? And they've just jumped on the same food system and just rebranded it to continue to extrapolate what we've been eating over the last 50 years since the Green Revolution, that's continued to produce more calories more cheaply, more quickly, with less nutrients than we need to feed more people. But we're not feeding them well at all. We're not feeding them healthy foods at all, and it's just crazy. So how why is regenerative agriculture so important in that picture to turn that around? How does that worldview change the narrative and improve things?
Well, I mean, one is that it puts more, Rob and I argue for regional food systems and not these like corporate global food systems. And we saw that in COVID in the US, where, one meat packing plant has issues and needs to shut down. And that creates meat shortages everywhere. And so we need less centralized control of our food and more regional resilient food systems. We need more money in the hands of farmers, which will build up more robust rural communities. And because right now, when you drive through the US, and I'm sure this is happening over there too, rural America is completely boarded up. There's like a Walmart or a Kmart or one of these like big box stores, or everyone's ordering from Amazon, and the little small businesses that used to keep the town going are gone. And that's largely because also agriculture is now, instead of several small farms that are feeding the local population, it's one gigantic farm that is producing corn for some organization, some corporation like in another state. So less jobs,
or some overseas,
less skilled jobs, all of that. So less pride. And so that's one way that we just need more small scale and medium scale businesses, period. And especially with food production. So I told you you're not going to get to all your questions.
No,
here we are almost halfway through. And what do you want in question 2? But anyway, so we are losing, our current system of agriculture is just absolutely not going to feed the planet moving forward. And so it's going to have to switch to regenerative, whether or not we want it to. So we might as well get ahead of the curve and switch.
So what are we headed for? What's the current farming practice system? When does that run out of viability? Is it soil health, microbiome health of the soil? We're losing soil rapidly. Don't know when exactly we're going to run out of available topsoil, et cetera. When does that run out if we can't continue to go at an exponential curve the way we have been for the last 50 years?
No, we'd need like 27 planets in not very much time if we keep going at this exponential growth rate that we have right now. A lot of people are repeating this. We have 60 harvests left, and that's actually not really based in science. It was a comment someone from the FAO made at a conference, like off the cuff with no research, but people are repeating it as if it's now the official position of the United Nations that we have 60 harvests left. So that's not true necessarily. We don't really know. We certainly have limited harvest left. There are limited resources going into, the chemical agriculture system. But I think one of the biggest issues is going to be water, because we're just, climate change is happening. It's going to get hotter in the middle, and the amount of food that we can produce is going to get further and further away from the equator as it just gets hotter and hotter. We're not going to be able to produce the cereal grains that we have been, because they need a certain climate, and we're just not going to have the water to be able to irrigate all of it. And so
lack of water is a massive issue in Australia. Everybody's clamoring to get enough water to water their farms, and the Chinese are buying up the biggest water allocations, and it's just a crazy grab for a limited resource. So tell us about the nutrient depletion of the soil, not just the topsoil eroding, but what happens to the nutritional content of the soil as we keep on doing this industrial agriculture year after year.
So that one I can answer pretty quickly. If you think of soil as a bank and you're growing a crop, the crop is actually taking nutrients out of the soil as it grows, and then you lop off that crop, the corn or the whatever it is, and you're taking the nutrients that were in the soil with it. And so you need to replete them in some way. And it's more than just nitrogen and the handful of chemicals that we're actually using to grow. There's a lot of other micronutrients. Our food is particularly low in selenium, which is really important for thyroid health in many parts of the country here. And so we, when you have grazing animals, you're actually building soil, and you're doing it naturally, and the grass is getting what it needs, because this is a very complicated, now I'm getting into a longer answer, but there's the carbon that is absorbed from CO2 in photosynthesis, it releases oxygen, the O2, and then the carbon becomes the grass, it becomes the roots, but then it also gets leaked down through the roots to feed microorganisms and also the fungal networks. And the fungal networks are actually mining the rocks and bringing nutrients to the grassroots in exchange for the carbon, for the sugars. And the microbes are doing the same thing. And so the grass can actually survive. It's not just the soil, it's all these intricate networks that are feeding the grass roots in exchange for carbon. Kind of cool. None of that is happening when we're doing, massive monoculture with chemical assistance. None of that is happening.
So it can continually depleting the nutrient and microbial diversity of the soil, and therefore the food we're getting just continues to plummet in nutrient density. So it's no wonder that we're lacking all these nutrients, and now we just got this massive excess of calories, but we have to chase nutrient density harder and harder and harder.
I mean, I think you're still going to do better eating broccoli grown today than not, right? Because there's other reasons why we're losing nutrients too. We're spraying the soil with chemicals, which sterilizes it and turns it into basically sand instead of like this spongy soil that actually provides nutrients. And so there have been studies that have shown that nutrient density has gone down of our vegetables today versus like in the 50s. But we're still better off, right? Eating nutrient dense as we can access compared to, the biggest reason why we're nutrient depleted isn't because of, broccoli. It's because of ultra processed food intake.
Yeah, our whole food system has become a mixture of flour, sugar, and oil from industrial agriculture. So definitely nutrient density. If you prioritize nutrient density from broccoli, spinach, green leafy vegetables, beef, seafood, you're going to get much better than the commonly available large-scale agricultural foods, but even better than that, you can sort of level it up by chasing foods that are created and grown in a more regenerative situation with vibrant soil health where animals and plants have come together. And that's sort of an indulgent luxury, but a lot of us who can afford it can then invest in that. And it's sort of amazingly selfish for us to say, okay, we've got money to invest in food that can feed my family in a good way that will make them healthy. But it's also unselfish that it's going to help regenerate the planet and help rebuild soil health. So we're sort of investing in that future of our planet.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you're just looking at this from a pure nutrition standpoint, eating, I mean, nutrient density 200 years ago might have meant, a lot more organ meats, which we're not really eating, and also a lot of weeds. So things like purslane, which I don't even think was in Chronometer. I'm not sure. But that has more omega-3 than like any plant. And it grows everywhere. It's like the most pervasive weed. So if you can find an organic farm and go help them weed and then just like fill a bag full of purslane, that's what they used to make or traditionally make saag with in India. And also spanakopita, it was purslane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage people to focus on getting the nutrients they need from the food they eat, from the best food choices they can make. But even better than that is to level up and source foods that come from a regenerative local farm system. And did you see the Biggest Littlest Farm as well?
Yes.
That was just crazy the way they demonstrated beautifully how such an amazing environment creates such amazing food that people want to invest in, and that their eggs were gone immediately, and they were just it creates a product that people want to buy, and farmers make more profit off. So not only are they not having to dump in all these fertilizers and chemicals and pesticides, and they've reduced their costs there, but they can then sell for a premium for these products that taste amazing because they contain the nutrients that people need. So just unpack that. What's in it for us? What's in it for farmers? What's in it for the planet from a cost benefit approach? Another big topic.
What's that?
Another big topic.
I mean, it's really funny when you talk to people about what they can afford and what they can't afford. So they'll say, well, grass-fed beef is too expensive, but they're like typing that on their latest iPhone that they upgraded from just the one that they bought the year before while they're waiting in line to go on a transatlantic flight to, France. And, so it's a value thing for sure. And some of us have the luxury of worrying about longevity and optimal health, either from a health event or something like that. Because I've worked in pretty poor neighborhoods where people don't really care about eating well, but it's not because they're necessarily lazy. It's just because when you're worried about, like, on the hierarchy of needs, and you're worried about your car starting tomorrow or losing your job, delayed gratification, eating steamed broccoli and roasted chicken compared to, diving into, a bowl of pasta or, some fast food takeout that the kids are going to eat and taste good and lights up those reward sensors. For a lot of people, that might be their only joy all day, if they've have a really hard life. So I get it. But to those of us who kind of have the privilege to be concerned about this and really prioritize that, it's to me, eating well is more important than driving a nice car or so many of the other things that I see the other moms at school pick up worrying about. I don't care as much about the brand of purse I have, so it's just a value thing. And it's unfortunate that we don't, as a society, value nutrient density more, and that, it's wrong, I think, that a Twinkie is cheaper than an apple. The ultra processed food is so incredibly cheap, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's just crazy that the least nutrient dense foods are heavily subsidized, and they're made even cheaper. Not only really cheap to produce, but they're subsidized to be even cheaper. So we just get this massive influx of excess calories that contain very, very little nutrition that is good for us. And one of the most popular questions on the group was, what would happen if we changed the farm subsidies to prioritize quantitative nutrient density versus just more calories? We've solved the limited energy problem. We've got this massive influx of excess calories, but they contain no nutrients. So what would happen if we changed the focus to quantitative nutrient density? That's my dream. If we can set people,
everything would be a meat farm.
So what was that?
It would just be a sea of meat farms, right? It would just be cows everywhere. And it's funny because in the U.S., feedlot finished beef is way cheaper than grass finished beef, but in a lot of other countries I've been to, grain finished beef is more expensive, and it's because they don't have the subsidies we have here in the U.S. For cheap corn.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. There's so many powers at play to keep the current food system the way it is, and just keep pushing the accelerator pedal so we get more calories more cheaply to sell the most nutrient poor, high profit margin foods possible, to create this growing population that's only made possible because we've got this unlimited amount of energy we're digging out of the ground to throw into our food system. And it's like, does no one see this reality, this trajectory we're headed for? And how do we get off this crazy roller coaster ride that can only end in disaster in so many ways?
Going down some dark holes, Marty.
So motivated.
Yes, I agree.
And it's like if we got people possessed with the idea of chasing the nutrients that they need from their food, and how do we get the seafood and the random green veggie and the beef,
everyone running around trying to find the endives.
Yeah, like you were in the competition.
Yeah.
But then the next step would be, how do we find a local farm that is going to contain even more of that than what's in Chronometer and the nutrient density database from the USDA? How do I find the most sustainably, regeneratively produced endive or beef or whatever it was to give me the nutrients that I need, that I know will be good for me and good for the planet, because it's regenerating topsoil, it's regenerating the microbiome, it's making a sustainable, diverse ecosystem that will be resilient and be here in 200 years. And, Rob said the planet will be here, but whether we will be, at least in a way that we respect and look in the mirror and go, we're an amazing human species who is moving forward and not de-evolving. It's just, that's what keeps me up at night. And I wake up every morning going, how can I create a system that can capture people's attention to quantify this? Because if you just say you need nutrients from food, don't you? What foods give you those nutrients? And it's not what's being marketed as.
Oh, you mean eating less meat isn't going to save the planet? Is that what you're
saying? But that's just a simple soundbite message that just gets shoved down everybody's throat, and they've heard it a million times. That must be true, and it's on a meme, so they'll celebrate it. But it's crazy.
I was just on a UN meeting earlier this week because I think I mentioned to you before we started recording. So the United Nations is trying to solve the world problems, all of them, and their nutrition goals are to, how do we have a healthy people within planetary boundaries food system? And it was really interesting because they put out a position paper which was actually very pro meat, pro animal livestock livestock-derived foods, I think is what they call it, or livestock-derived foods for developing countries. So they were admitting that, yes, this can reverse or prevent stunting. It can increase test scores in children. But clearly in Western countries, we all need to eat less meat.
Yeah.
And that meat actually causes diseases, but only in developed countries.
Are humans different in Africa and developing countries to America, or what's the go?
Because we're eating so much. And so I posed a question that did not get acknowledged. So in the US, we're only eating less than 2 ounces of beef per person per day. This diet that they're trying to propose through the United Nations is the equivalent. You can eat the equivalent of 1 blueberry's worth of beef per person per day, red meat. So that would be lamb and pork as well. You could eat 2 blueberries worth of chicken, but you could have 62 blueberries worth of sugar. And this is the model diet that is very likely to be adopted by the United Nations as, it's not like forced or anything, but it's going to be like, if you're a good compliant United Nations country, you're going to also agree that eating lots of sugar and not eating meat is the way to go. And it's just insanity. It's absolute insanity. I don't understand. We're clearly, if you just look at the science, so it's just like with, looking at nutrient density, but if you just look at the science, we're eating more ultra processed foods than ever before. We're eating less beef, and things are not going in a good direction. And you were talking about like, well, what do we need in order to get there? One thing I saw with COVID, one good thing is, more people are growing vegetables in their backyards. Everyone I know here in the northeast of the US who raises livestock is sold out completely. Like their animals are sold out even for the next 2 years.
Wow.
Like they're just like waiting lists.
For the farmers, that's great.
Yeah, it's really, really good. People are really paying attention. They're cooking a lot more at home, which we know is good because portions are smaller at home, although everyone's working from home. So 24 access to the fridge is not a good thing. My nutrition practice has never been busier because people have gained a lot of weight through this, stress and inflammation of COVID, but also just the access to snacking constantly.
Yeah. But there's no time in history where it's been more important to be resilient and healthy and metabolically healthy and not overweight and well nourished and have a thriving immunity.
So, on the downside though, what I'm seeing is people are realizing what meetings could have been emails, right? And what people maybe don't need to be commuting to an office and can work from home efficiently. But a lot of people, so many people I know that live in New York City are now moving out of the city and buying country houses as their full-time residences, which is great for children. Like great. I love that. But it also means that land prices are going up. And so it's really hard to grow enough cabbages in suburban Boston to support the land prices. And so we need more policy that's protecting green space. In every town should have multiple farms that are producing food for the community, and not just lettuce, but also chickens and eggs and, maybe some goats and stuff like that. So,
yeah. So if we're not farmers, what can we do if we're not going to start a backyard veggie garden to grow all of our food, which is not viable for most people? What can you actually do to promote your family's health and the planet's health, and I suppose make it cheaper if you've got the means to make it cheaper for other people in your community and your country and the world? If this becomes large-scale regenerative agriculture, has to be led, obviously not going to be led by the UN or the the USDA or Eat Lancet or whatever,
the
that they're
World
going
Bank.
the
I mean, none of
opposite
these people are going to
direction.
be pro. Silicon Valley is not going to be pro support your small scale regenerative farmer. You know,
Mm,
that's not good for Beyond Burger
mm,
stock price, right? Um, so, and that's really who's funding this stuff and is
mm,
behind this stuff is Beyond Burger and Possible Foods. You know, so making people think that meat is the problem, not ultra processed foods, and making sure that people are as far removed from their farmer as possible, so
mm,
that they can create these magical pure foods in factories, so that no death happens and you can feel good about yourself while making their bank accounts larger. I mean, that's the goal, right?
yeah.
So what can you do? So it's funny because I was looking through our book and chatting with Rob once COVID hit, because our book came out, we were done with our book. It came out mid-COVID, but we, you know, was already at the printers. And I was like, look at all the things we said in here that are actually relevant to COVID. Because Rob and I are both sympathetic to preppers in a way. Like, I was actually stuck in Texas. We were supposed to be on the Joe Rogan podcast, and things got crazy, and there was this ice storm, and Rob's boiling snow, you know, like
He survived Caveman, so good for you, Rob.
yes,
That's a
yeah, I
crazy.
had to go down to his house because the hotel I was in was like, there was no running water and no bottled water for anybody. So, you know, we had all these tips in the book, and I should have it open, but, you know, one is like, keep yourself metabolically healthy. Like, just there you go. Don't be a burden on our healthcare system by letting yourself be unhealthy. Keep yourself as healthy. You know, be responsible for your own health. Be responsible for your financial self as well. Like, don't be part of this ridiculous consumerism credit fantasy that you can have anything you want at any time, anywhere, with no, you know. So that's part of it. Supporting local farms, and whether that's, you know, buying from them or volunteering. A lot of local farms will accept volunteers if people are underemployed or unemployed. Go get your workout by digging holes on a farm and, you know, helping them build fences. And, you know, their farmer carries are actual things, not just like
Not just with kettlebells
silly
in the
CrossFit
gym.
workouts. They're like actual, like, you know, and so farming is an awesome workout and a great way to get your vitamin D, and also like hang out with cool people that you probably have never talked to before.
And get in touch with nature in a real meaningful way that's we're so divorced of that in touch with nature.
Yeah, nature isn't just like something you visit. It's
Or
like,
see on Instagram.
or see on Instagram if you don't visit it. But actually understanding that nature is us, that we are animals too. So, you know, cooking from home, teaching your kids how to cook. So there's so many more things than just like buying a freezer full of grass-fed beef. If you're talented at making websites, maybe make a website for, you know, helping the local farmer who is likely not that into marketing.
Yep.
So there's lots of opportunities to help support a better food system.
Yeah, no, and so many opportunities to make it more viable, to have that local farm that tastes good for you and it's good for your family and good for the planet because it's regenerating it, it's growing for the future and not just depleting and drawing down on natural resources that we're going to really miss. Eventually, we're going to look up and go, where'd all the nutrients in our soil go? Where did our soil go? Where'd the microbiome go? Where'd all the animals go? And what do we do about it now? And how do we wind that back? So hopefully enough people will take this into their own hands and chase nutrients in their food with food that tastes amazing. And, you know, it tastes amazing because it's got what you need in those foods. So what are you working on in the future, and what are you excited about? So many things by the sounds of it.
Yes. So I am starting a new, actually, I think next week we're going to launch the website. So it's called the Global Food Justice Alliance. It is fighting for culturally appropriate food in traditional um, societies where, rich vegan people from Sweden are coming in and saying that they need to get rid of their meat. So we're going to be pointing out the unscientific nature of these limited meat or no meat diets, and the elitism of them, the privilege it is to be pushing away traditional foods and animal source foods. It's a coalition of academics, doctors, dietitians, and chefs who are all just very concerned about the movement towards less and no meat on the global scale. And so I'm really excited about that because it's really big. There aren't many people other than industry who are talking about this kind of thing. And so that's my latest passion project that I'm really excited about. I'm still seeing clients, but it's getting really tight because I'm just so excited about this Global Food Justice Alliance stuff. I'm still doing screenings of Sacred Cow and talking about the film and the book. And, still quite active on Instagram at Sustainable Dish. And
the book is amazing. It really, it's worth it to get your head around the big picture issues, and you've gone to the effort of capturing them all in one place in one book. And like Rob says, if you disagree with us, read the book, tell us where you disagree with us, tell us where we've got it wrong, because this is how we see it. This is how we've wrapped it up in one big integrated picture, and it's really hard to unsee once you understand all that. So have you got people coming back and pushing back in the details and saying you got it wrong here and here and here? And
there's one piece that we're editing for the paperback version, and that is the white oak pasture study. So the study that showed that this grass-fed beef was actually sequestering more carbon than Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers. And that's because when it went through peer review, which hadn't happened when we wrote the book, there were several other factors that contributed to the carbon sequestration. It wasn't only the cattle. It was also he was applying compost to the pastures, and there were also chickens that were following the cattle. So they weren't able to say 100% definitively it was 100% cattle that were causing the major carbon sequestration. Now, is it likely? Yes. Were the cattle probably 95% of the carbon sequestration? Probably. But they weren't able to prove that. And so I have to go back in and adjust the very strong statements that we made, only because initially we didn't have that information before the peer review.
But I suppose the holistic regenerative farm, whether it be the animals, the cattle or the chickens or the pigs, that are all working together to create something more vibrant.
At the end of the day, did it improve ecosystem function? Yes. Is it a benefit to the environment? Yes. Is this farm one of the most amazing farms that I've ever been to? Oh my God. Yes. I'm going there. I'm doing some workshops there in the fall. It's incredible the amount of jobs that this guy has created in the poorest county in the country. It's what he's done is amazing. So anyhow, so I do have to adjust that. And Rob and I are always, as scientists, really open, tell us where we got it wrong. And if we see different evidence, we'll change our position. So we're trying to be as unemotional about all of this as possible, but yet passionate at the same time, that we believe this overall worldview that natural cycles trump tech.
We try to engineer and optimize everything, but the further we get away from how things were in the past, the further, more dystopian potentially it gets. So is it Sacred Cow available online, Netflix?
Not
Where
Netflix.
check it out? Not on
Ugh.
Netflix yet.
Netflix can produce as a Netflix original Seaspiracy, but it can't seem to even want to carry Sacred Cow. I've been to Netflix. I had coffee with Netflix.
Wow.
There were a lot of vegan food offerings in the Netflix cafeteria. There's a lot of politics at Netflix. So it is available on Amazon in the US and Canada. It's on iTunes in Australia and New Zealand. It's on the Evolve network in Australia. I just signed with FanForce, and so they're going to be letting people actually host screenings in theaters, and so that's kind of cool. So you can actually just go to them and get all the information you need in order to host your own screening of Sacred Cow anywhere you want in a theater. Which cool. I think people are going to start watching movies in theaters again soon. And I hope to be able to come out there and visit with you. I'm starting to do some work with some ranches in Australia and New Zealand. So I'd love to come down.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And any final thoughts to leave people with on regenerative agriculture and how they can look after the health of them, the family, and the planet all at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this stuff is interrelated. I think you and I both like see the dark side of all that stuff. And so it can be overwhelmingly depressing sometimes when you look at how screwed up our food system is and our society overall and how everyone's seeing everything. But then once you realize, okay, well, what can I do about this? The best thing I think we can do is try to help people understand that, taking care of their bodies and teaching their kids how to do that and just be good people and enjoy life is the best thing you can do. So, yeah, I'm happy. I have 2 healthy, happy children that are exploring their interests and are in exploring nature and excited about the world, and hopefully we'll leave a good mark.
Yeah, and we can invest in ourselves, our own health, our family's health in a way that regenerates and makes a healthier world for the future that won't just be dystopian. But anyway, yeah, I hope people listening will gain hope and be inspired to do something in their backyard in a way that will change that. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your friendship, and thanks for your support.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't slur too many words. I didn't even finish this. All right.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye.